According to a tweet from Brian Stelter at CNN, he says that the US President, Joe Biden, has said something before the official speech which went on record. And the US President said that he talked with 25 to 30 heads of state, including Putin, Xi, and many others. And they were talking about how the 21st century is going to be marked by the battle between democracy and autocracy. Because Joe Biden believes that due to rapid scientific advancements, democracies have a very hard time in coming up with a decision on the spot, while more dictatorship-like governments have an easier time to reach a consensus. And we noticed this with Brexit. The European Union already had a plan. They already had a decision within a couple of months, while for the United Kingdom, it took years until they came up with a decision, because in the UK, you had various party infighting, you had various fights amongst party lines, and it took a while for them to deliberate and come up with the deal they came up now, because the UK operates based on a democracy where people have different opinions, and it takes a while for them to reach a consensus. So the question is, wouldn't an autocracy be better? A nation that has smart people in charge, which will make the smart decisions, and everyone else gets to benefit. And this is not something new throughout human history. I mean, even the idea of Plato's Republic is based around this. You have a council of wise elders, the smart people, people who know better, and they will take the smart decisions. And the problem with this is that the smart people are still human beings. They can still make mistakes. They're still prone to corruption. They can still do decisions that favor them rather than the entire system. And they're not going to be held responsible for the mistakes they made. And we can only look at history and see what happened under Mao Zedong, when he realized that sparrows are picking the crops, and they're doing economical damage to China. So they decided to kill all of the sparrows. And as a consequence, an unforeseen consequence, was that the number of locusts multiplied, because the sparrows would pick them off and hold their population under control, and it created a massive famine throughout China. Another more recent example is Lysenkoism, which is something that, in my opinion, every single kid in every single democratic country should be made aware. And it's really the best example of why scientism can fail. And the story goes like this. In the Soviet Union, Lysenko did not believe at all in genetics. And the reason he didn't believe in genetics wasn't because science told him that genetics are wrong. He didn't believe in genetics for ideological reasons, which was the fact that the Nazis believed in genetics. So if the Nazis believed in genetics, then that means that genetics as a field must be wrong. And this is quite funny, because it's actually called the genetical fallacy, which means that if an idea has its root based on a evil person, then the idea itself must be evil. Now, this isn't the main problem, because in a normal functioning society, people like Lysenko would have been proven wrong through the scientific method, and they would be discarded. But the problem in a dictatorship is that Lysenko's scientific studies pleased the ear of Stalin. He really enjoyed what Lysenko had to offer, and as such, any person that showed any type of resistance to Lysenko was immediately discredited, and if not outright fired, then they would be sent to Siberia in order to die there. So most scientists kept their heads down, like they didn't want to contradict Lysenko because they were afraid of losing their job. And at the end of the day, scientists are human beings as well. They get up, they go to work, they do a job, and they get money. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if the job that they're doing is good or not. What it matters is that they please the person paying the money. Because again, scientists are human beings prone to errors. So Lysenko created this very interesting ideology, separating plants based on class. So just like you have the working class, you have certain types of plants that are from the same class. And if you plant these plants very close to one another, then they're not going to compete for resources, but instead they're going to share resources just like good socialists do. Just like the workers of the world are uniting, so too will the plants share their resources. So by implementing this way of thinking, you can now plant double the amount of crops because you don't need to leave any spaces between the plants. So on the same farmable land, on the same acres of land, you can now plant double the amount of crops. And because of that, you also don't need that much fertilizer because now the plants are going to cooperate and they're going to share the fertilizers among each other. And of course, anyone that contradicted Lysenko, anyone that would go against what he was proposing would immediately get in trouble. As I mentioned before, they would either get fired or worse, arrested, made to disappear. And what ends up happening is that the farmers were forced to implement Lysenko's ideology. We're talking about a dictatorship, not a democracy. Because in a democracy, like maybe some people would have indeed thought that Lysenko is right, and they would have tried his methods on a small patch of land to see if it actually works or not. But no, massive numbers of farmers were forced to implement this measure. And it created an artificial famine within the Soviet Union. A famine that could have been avoided. You know, it's one thing when you have drought. It's one thing when you have locusts. It's another thing when, because people were worshipping the intelligentsia, they ended up creating a famine. And of course, the farmers were also sent to Siberia because they didn't implement Lysenkoism properly, which is another hallmark of autocrats. They're never the ones responsible. And think about it. In a country where everything is being decided top down, every single bad thing that happens in that country must be because of the leadership. I mean, if a cop does something hideous, let's say executes a man in plain daylight, the chief of police is usually held responsible, like he's going to resign. You don't see the same in an autocratic system. Usually the people in charge are never wrong. It's either that the people executing the orders didn't execute them properly. It's because of foreign agitators. It's because of subversive elements within the nation that are destabilizing and blah, blah, blah. And we notice this happen time and time again throughout history. Chernobyl, another example that could have been easily avoided was it not for the secretive and mismanaging way that the Soviet Union ran things. So, you know, like the idea that putting scientists or putting smart people in charge is going to fix things, very skeptical. For two reasons. And as I mentioned, like number one, not everything that's efficient is also good. And number two, they're still human beings. And even if they wouldn't be prone to error, they would still be prone to corruption. Like they would still make decisions that benefit them and don't benefit the people. And the first one, like let's go back to it a little bit. China, for example, was I seen it in a documentary, was developing a sort of armband, and I made a video about it. Like you can go back and see it. They had an armband that kids at school would wear, and the armband would check to see the brain process of the student as he is solving a math equation, and it would measure to see if a student is actually focusing on the task or his mind is dozing off. Now, think about it this way. A lot of parents were very pleased because allegedly like this improves the grade of the student. Like the teacher can actually see when the student isn't focusing and they're like, hey, what are you doing? Stop dozing off. Stop daydreaming. Like focus on the math problem. The main issue with this is that like a lot of parents are happy. But now think about the fact that this can be implemented at a corporate level. And now the parent that was happy that his kid is getting higher grades will have his boss force him to wear the tiara. And then HR lady is going to call him and say, yeah, we noticed that your concentration level has been dropping by 0.25% this month. If you're not going to raise it by at least 0.23, we're going to not give you a bonus. Imagine that corporate hellhole. Or heck, even better, imagine if the schools would compile the data from all their students, turning human beings into actual NPCs from a video game, and when you go to look for a job, the company can just look into your school's database and be like, okay, so John, he's got like a 25 on his concentration, he's got a 15 on his IQ, he's got like a 12 on his whatever. And then they would hire people based on that. Like, you would become a number. And you know what? That would probably be efficient as hell. That would probably be the most efficient system in the world. Is it really a system you'd like to live in? Is efficiency, like just having the best solution for the job, is it really good? And this is the problem with democracy. Yeah, democracy is not meant to be efficient. Democracy is meant to be a place where people want to live. And history has shown that democracy has BTFO'd all of the other systems, because you have people that were fleeing from East Germany to West Germany, people that were fleeing from North Korea to South Korea. Even North Korea, like authoritarian nations, pay lip service to democracy. It's like the Democratic Republic of blah, blah, blah. Because democracy is not actually the normal state of man. No, like even in the primitive era, they had tribal chieftains. You have kings. You have dictators. The primal state of man is probably some sort of authoritarian regime, but people somehow managed to create stable democracies. And everyone is now saying, well, democracy is failing. No, democracy is absolutely working as intended. The bottom line is democracy can only work while the people under the democracy keep advocating for it, while the people under the free nation want freedom. The moment that goes away is the moment that stops. And right now, I think that people on the far left believe that the masses cannot be allowed to be free because freedom leads to Nazism. I'm not kidding. That's what Herbert Marcuse thought. That's what a lot of academic people think. It's when you go on the internet and you say that you care about free speech, which is a human right, and the answer is like, oh, you just want free speech so you can say the N-word. Literally what he's saying is like, you just want freedom so you can be a Nazi. That's it. And then you have people on the right that are like the extreme right, which believe that the only way we can avoid communism is by having like some dictator, some strong man, some... the father syndrome, the patriarch or whatever. So no one is arguing for democracy anymore. No one is arguing for freedom. I haven't seen it mentioned in any newspaper. Ideas like liberty, freedom, tolerance, they're gone. No one is arguing for them. So, it's the bottom line on the idea of freedom. It's like, yeah, people can have it as long as they want it. And I just don't see it. Maybe the silent majority is there and they're not just voicing their opinions. But what I do think, looking at the trajectory from the European Union, seeing Guy Verhofstadt of the European Union saying that the future is a future of empires, and the European Union is going to be the quote-unquote good empire, seeing the trajectory of a lot of nations, we're moving towards authoritarianism. Even in Germany, the AfD had its members harassed, its headquarters bombed. One of his members actually ended up in a hospital with brain injury, and the entire press apparatus is against them. And for some reason, we need to think that this is normal in a democracy. I mean, they're a legal party under the law. In Germany, where it's illegal to have, like, extremist parties by the law. So in a functioning democracy, this should not happen. Maybe in the future we are going to head to some form of authoritarian dictatorship, and then hopefully people are going to rise up, it's like a pendulum, I suppose. People in Eastern Europe, like myself, we've been through communism, we've been through dictatorship. We realized just how bad it is, and we rose up. But it took a couple of decades for that to happen. Poland has been through 2 dictatorships. Half of Poland was under Nazi occupation, the other half under communism. Now Poland bans both Nazis and communists as ideologies in their country. Maybe that's the thing, like Poland is one of the nations that's going to punish social media for censoring politicians there. So yeah, who knows? We'll see. Still, I found this speech to be very interesting, and I thought it's worthy of a conversation. Now, as usual, I'll be live streaming after this, so if for some weird reason you enjoy hearing me ramble, then there's a link into the pinned comment. You can click it, and it will take you to my live stream. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on my other channel. Take care.